Mr. Prather, did I pronounce your name right? This is Mr. Mendoza.
Hi there. Yes, sir. It's Prather. Long A.
Prather.
Yes,
okay,
sir.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, okay? We got it.
We got it. Are we ready to go?
No, we're waiting on our board president. We only have 2 board members right now.
Okay.
So we don't have a quorum. Okay. Sai, I'm going to recommend to the board that you and Mr. Prather, with your presentations, be moved up front, okay? So we can let you go first. Let you all.
Thank you. I have another.
I'm sure you all have other meetings that you got to get to, but yeah, we'll move you up a little bit.
Sorry, you froze for a minute, Superintendent.
Okay. No, we'll arrange it as soon as we can get the meeting started.
Okay, no problem. Thanks so much.
Mr. Sepulveda is in now.
Mr. Sepulveda, if you can hear me, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's 5:05. Come on, Tori. Come on. Sepulveda, you guys, is gonna dial in, so we're gonna see if we can get him.
Joel Sepulveda.
Is that you, Mr. Sepulveda? Hello? Mr. Sepulveda, can you hear me?
To replay your message, press 1. To continue recording, press 2. To delete and re-record your message, press 3. For delivery options, press 4. To cancel this message, press star. To send this message now, press pound or hang up. To replay your message, press 1. To continue...
37.
7137. Item China.
Joel Sepulveda.
Okay, can you hear me now?
They hear you now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well,
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Loud and clear, sir.
Mr. Sepulveda, go ahead and start the meeting, please.
Okay, I'd like to start the regular meeting of Cobre Board of Education. It is almost 5:15. We had a little bit of trouble getting on. Please let the minutes show that myself, I don't know who else is on there. Mr. Holguin
And Mr. Gomez.
and Mr. Gomez. There's 3 of us that are on. Please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. Entertain a motion for approval of agenda items.
Gomez, so moved.
Motion by Mr. Gomez, second. Do I hear a second? Do I
Mr.
hear a
Holguin's
second?
muted.
Mr. Holguin, can you hear us? There it is.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, asking for a second, Mr. Lee.
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm prepared to second that based on the fact that we haven't had an opportunity to consider all the alternatives for the superintendent contract, the search proposal. So I'd rather not vote on that. I'd rather table that till the next meeting until we can explore all the options.
This is just the beginning of a presentation by the committee. What you're talking about is the committee, I mean, not the committee, but the organization for the superintendent search. It's not the search itself yet.
Right, so I guess I'm asking, is this the only option that we have?
Probably not.
So yeah, that's what I'm saying is I'd like to be able to explore all the options prior to voting on one.
Okay.
If I may, President Saveda, that is part of what Dr. Prather's presentation would cover.
Correct.
Yes.
Is it, Mr. Hogina will help lay out what your options are and give you the opportunity to think through it. The search proposal that was presented was simply to give you a framework of what to expect should you decide to use facilitators. You can certainly choose not to take any action on that this evening, but it is to give you the options that you would have as you move through your superintendent search.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. I guess my question is, Mr. President, is that the only consulting firm that is an option for moving forward with the search?
Mr. Holguin, from President Sepulveda, Mr. Holguin, this is Dr. Prather, and the answer is absolutely not. All this is a New Mexico School Boards Association presentation on how to conduct a superintendent search, the best practices. And what I think it does, Mr. Holguin, is it gives you a very good overview of the different options that you have. You have many choices that you can make, and it's very prudent of all of you to discuss these and discuss them in a public meeting before you make any determination on taking next steps. There's certainly no attempt on Mr. Shirley's part or my part to ask you to take action tonight on anything. I was invited to. I was invited to make a presentation on behalf of the New Mexico School Boards Association, and I'm prepared to do so if you'd like to have that take place.
Okay, that makes a little more sense to me. So I guess I'll go ahead and second that motion.
Mr. Sepulveda, we have a second.
I'm sorry, I was muted again. Any other corrections to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. President, I would, and board members, I'd like to recommend a point of order here that I'd like to ask the board to okay moving up under administration for the A, the B, and then also the C presentations in that order up to the first section, number 1. Mr. Prather, and I know Saya, our senator, has to be at other meetings real quick. So with your permission, I'd like to recommend to the board that we realign this to under the introduction after item E, so that we can let them present and they don't have to wait so long, because there'll be that's quite a lengthy school calendars. You know, we're going to have to review those. So that's the recommendation, sir.
Okay. You're the recommendation. Any objections? Call for the vote. Mr. Gomez.
Yes.
Mr. Holguin.
Yes.
Mr. Holguin.
Yes.
Okay, myself, yes. Motion carries. Item D, approval of the minutes of April 26th. Call for a motion.
So moved. This is Gabe.
Motion by Mr. Holguin. Second?
Gomez, second.
Second by Mr. Gomez. Any corrections to the minutes? Call for the vote. Mr. Holguin.
Yes.
Mr. Gomez.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Motion carries. Moves us to item A. Mr. Mendoza.
Yes, I have the presentation for the New Mexico School Board Association training module, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Prather, and Mr. Shirley, please.
Thank you. Thank you, President Sepulveda, members of the board, Mr. Holguin and Mr. Gomez. Honored to be with you tonight. Very brief background. The New Mexico School Boards Association has been providing this service to school boards across the state for a number of years now in terms of training. And we're offering you a training module tonight. The three of you will receive 1 hour of training credit for the work that you're doing with me this evening. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you right now, and we'll be picking a window that I'm going to be using to share that screen. So bear with me for a second while I pick up the screen, and we'll start that presentation. Please feel free, members of the board, to stop me at any point, and we'll go from there. So with that said, I'm going to bring the screen up, and here we go. So this, you should now all be able to see a slideshow that will start on hiring your new superintendent, best practices guide to the board's most important decision. I believe you can see this. Correct me if I'm wrong. Mr. Mendoza, is it showing up on your screen?
No, sir. No, it's not.
Okay. Thank you for the heads up on that. Let me see where the hiccup is with the screen share then, because we will be doing I don't know why. There we go. It should now be showing on your screen.
Yes, sir, it is.
Very good. Okay. So what you now see with a slideshow, we will go to the beginning, and it's now showing the training that we're doing tonight. So Superintendent Mendoza is retiring, and you're going to be looking for a new superintendent. What are your next steps? And this, Mr. Holguin, this is a really first answer to your question. Do we have somebody? Your very first decision that you need to make is there somebody in the district that we'd like to have become our next superintendent? And the reason that this is your very first decision, it's your decision. You do not have to search. Nowhere in New Mexico statute or New Mexico regulations, PED regulations, or New Mexico school statutes does it require a board to conduct a superintendent search. So, Mr. Holguin, this really begins to get right to your question about what options do you have. Your first option is to discuss this in executive session, and discuss in executive session individuals in your district who you may wish to invite in to interview to become your next superintendent. I strongly recommend, and we have discovered it's most successful if this is the consensus of the board, that the board feels to a person. You don't really do much for a successful tenure if it's a 3-2 invitation, and you can put that together in an executive session, but you must announce the action and act upon that decision in a public meeting that has been duly noticed. Obviously, then you could not do anything tonight, but you could then set up an executive session to discuss internal candidates that you might want to consider. If the answer to the question is no, if you say no, we really want to search, then you have, and again, back to Mr. Holguin's concern, you have quite a number of possibilities that you can find yourselves facing. And please, members of the board, stop me at any time you have a question. If you look at this little template right here, you've got 3 different possible search options that are facing you. You can do it yourselves, and that's called board conducted, board directed. And you can have an external facilitator help you with it. That's called externally facilitated, board directed. Or you can actually pretty much just turn it over to a headhunter, and that's called turnkey headhunter, board directed. I'm going to take a couple of minutes on each of these, hit some other key things to think about as you go through this discussion as a board on this process. First one, board conducted, board directed. There's a number of school boards that have done this. The Hobbs Municipal Schools is finishing up their search, has just finished its search, and they did it themselves. Now, they have a human resources department, and they use that department, but they did it. It's very inexpensive that way. It's only your cost of advertising because you have your things in there. Your board is completely in control of the process, and you're totally involved in the process. Now, if you're not collaborative, if you're a board that's not working well together, you'll find this a very serious challenge to try and do this. And it's also pretty labor intensive because the board will find itself working the hardest with the 3 options by doing it this way. And if you don't have good human resource support within the district, some smaller districts in the state, certainly not Cobre, but some smaller districts, could potentially miss a step or miss a key piece of the process. So that's the first option, board conducted, board directed. The second one, externally facilitated, board directed, and this is what Mr. Shirley has worked with Mr. Sepulveda, President Sepulveda, and Mr. Mendoza to put a draft on the table for you. An externally facilitated, board conducted it's done by an external facilitator. You're still totally involved in the process, but the heavy lifting has been now picked up by the facilitator that's taking care of crossing the T's, dotting the I's, and getting the thing done. And it tends to make sure that it's a smooth search process. Silver City just recently completed their search. They used this process, and they felt pretty comfortable about it from the evaluations that came in. You need to be sure that you relate to the facilitator comfortably. You're somewhat less involved, and there are some costs with this. The average cost is, like Mr. Shirley has provided a cost for you on the proposal, draft proposal for your review. And this normally runs under $10,000 when it's done by the New Mexico School Boards Association. I have done this as a trainer myself. Now, we've got 5 veteran superintendents who are working with us in this. Mr. Shirley is one of these 5 members of this cadre. I'm member also. And we've both a long term of lots of experience in working in New Mexico public education. Now, the service, we meet with the board. This would be what would continue this evening if you wanted to ask some specific questions about the proposal and put that proposal contract. And then once you approve that, and when you approve that, if that's the direction you choose, we would take care of all the steps, making sure they happen, make sure that everything is done. You'd be communicated with regularly and consistently, and we would help get the new person selected, suitably inducted into the district. The last option, and this is the route some school districts have used. Albuquerque Public Schools, for example, have used turnkey headhunter, and these are firms, companies that do they're professional search firms, is what they are, and you've got the widest range. They have hundreds of people in actively looking for work in their cadre, in their group that they're working with. Very little work for the board with this, but it is most expensive. Typically, these will cost you between $25,000 and $50,000 if you use this particular kind of service. And you're also very lightly involved. There's very limited board involvement. They may potentially, you may have some potential mismatch. There's some companies, BWP and Associates, Ray and Associates, Hazard, Young, Aetna and Associates, McPherson and Jacobson. These are companies around the country that do these, and they would certainly work with you there in Cobre if this was of interest. Let's real quickly run through some other key pieces in a good search process. We've discovered that the most important thing, well, let me stop for a second. Any question on these three search processes before I move on, members of the board?
No questions
Mr.
from me.
Thank you. Okay.
No questions as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. This is Mr. Sepulveda. Well, not a question, more of a comment. I think in the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 superintendents that we've gotten, the board has done it all by themselves. And I agree with you. It is time consuming. And sometimes I wonder if we have gotten the right person. And there's a lot of time that the board has to spend in doing this and evaluating applications, all of that stuff. And it is time consuming.
Thank you, sir. Yes, that is, and I assure you that is the challenge. And you're being a veteran of this experience yourself. That's exactly what other board members from around the state and other board presidents from around the state have told us. So what we would do is if we did this for you, or if you do it yourselves, put a plan together. A plan's critical because you put the timetable in the plan, when you're going to do what, when you're going to identify the desired characteristics, where you're going to advertise, how you're going to advertise, what your compensation package is going to be, how much you're going to involve your public, your stakeholders in this whole process, and which groups, which constituencies. And then you approve the plan, and it drives the process. Now, if we do this, we put the draft plan together for you, and it's yours to modify as you choose and then to approve. Typical timetable is fairly about a 3-month process, to between 3 and 4 months to get a superintendent on board done right. And part of that is it takes up with the Open Meetings Act and everything. Unless you wish to commit to a number of special meetings, then we try to work around regularly scheduled board meetings. And so that means the districts then need to work on this in terms of, it takes about a month to get the thing planned and approved and adopted and underway. And then there's a period of time, a couple of weeks to 3 weeks or 4 weeks, getting the feedback from different groups about what's looked for in the new superintendent, the criteria, the important things for the teachers in your district, the important things for the administrators in your district that this new superintendent will bring, the important things that your parents and community are looking for. And 30's minimum for advertising. You really don't have much. It takes at least 30 days for that word to get around, but we have some very good places to put ads if you would choose to use us. Reference checking and screening, receiving all the applications, reference checking and screening those. Site visits, probably not, but the interviews and so forth, couple of weeks to get that all done and process the data that comes from that process. So real quickly, some things to think about with the stakeholders. I mean, this is key. You always want to remember this first bullet, that the board is making the decision. You can't delegate that. That is statute. You employ, in accord with state law, the board is the body empowered to employ the superintendent. So they're going to be advisories to you. They are not search committees. They are advisory committees to the board who is doing the search. Inside people like staff and administrators, external, how much? And how are you going to pick them? How will they be selected? And what are they going to be involved in? And how do we get the feedback from them to the board? How do you get their feedback so that it's done fairly and no extra squeaky wheel, one loud voice overrides the others? These are things to consider as the plan is put together. What are the desired characteristics? And you start with your job description and you go from there with what's important to each board member and what stakeholder groups think's important. And then that's used then to help drive your advertisement and also the process of applying and later the development of your interview questions and so forth. Things to think about in terms of where to get it out to. And these are some different places that how widely do you want to cast your net? So President Sepulveda and members of the board, that's basically it. Thinking in terms of your salary, you'd need to advertise a salary range. It's recommended, but you can discuss benefits in executive session and negotiate these with your superintendent. And these would include things like the standard insurance, health insurance, and retirement, but you could also talk about some other options to attract somebody that you are particularly interested in. And these are things that a facilitator could help you consider and make your decision. Again, make your decision because these are all board decisions. And Mr. Holguin, I really admire your point on that. Do not rush into this. Take your time. Other things, confidentiality piece is important. Background checks should be done and so forth. So once you've gotten the person selected, there's some steps that we would facilitate helping take you through, but you'd make your offer. You might well get a counter offer. That's happened frequently. And know what your best and final offer will be. When you finish, then get your thanks out to all the people who were involved and thanks the people who did apply but weren't selected. And then get your evaluation plan in place for your new superintendent and have a long-term relationship. So, President Sepulveda, members of the board, I'll stop screen share at that point and I will return to your meeting as a face and discuss with you any questions that you have, anything that I can respond to in terms of questions that presentation may have raised.
Any questions?
Yes, Mr. President. I have several questions.
Thank you.
So my first question is on the selection criteria. how would we solicit those critical elements that we're looking for in a superintendent from the parents, from the public?
Great, good question. And it ties directly into how you choose to set up your advisory teams. In the plan, the draft plan, the review draft plan that Mr. Shirley developed and has submitted, it's under the name of Prather Consulting because I am a consultant for the School Boards Association. But when Mr. Shirley and I conduct a search, it's done under Prather Consulting. Mr. Shirley would meet with each one of the board members individually, probably virtually, given the distance and everything. But he would meet with each of you, discuss at length what's important to you, and at the same time, you would also in the plan have identified who is going to be your advisory teams. Typically, it's typically it's three groups: administrators, staff, and community. Or it could be just the administrators and staff together with your employees and community. And board members could identify these, or you could ask for volunteers from your community, but we would work that out and it would be in the final approved plan that you would put together, Mr. Holguin, and that you would approve as a board. Once we get that feedback from them, they would be invited through a series of meetings to provide their perspectives. What's important to the community, what's important to staff, and that would be pulled together and brought back to the board for final approval before advertisements were created, before the invitation was put on the street. So that's how that would be dealt with.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate that. My other two questions, or one question, is in terms of reference checks and interviews. So how involved will the board be during this piece of the hiring?
The reference checks are, if we were to conduct the search for you, we contract with a private investigator who confirms that there have been no felony convictions, no DWIs, and no bankruptcies on the part of individual applicants. They are made aware when they apply that check will be conducted. They give their permission for it if they are selected as a finalist. We only do those with the finalists. And then when that check is completed, we submit the completed reports on, let's say you have 5 finalists or 4, let's say 4 finalists that you're going to interview, then you would receive reports on each of those 4 finalists from the private investigator before the interviews took place. Now, for the interview questions themselves, the board would develop its own interview questions related to the things that are important to the board, and Mr. Shirley would facilitate those questions developed. He would also work with the community and staff. Let's assume 2 advisory teams. He would work with the community and staff to develop their interview questions. All 3 groups would interview independently. The advisory teams would provide anonymous feedback in using a tool called SurveyMonkey, so that every board member would have a set of that material, the impressions that each of the finalists makes on the advisory teams, their words, not ours, their words prior to you having to make your decision. And you would conduct your own set of interviews as a board with the finalists. So that process of bringing it down to taking the applicants, bringing them down to qualified applicants, letting the board select, the board would select from the qualified applicants who they want to interview. And then the interviews would take place based, as I've just discussed, and you would then have that data along with the board's impressions to use in executive session to discuss your determination and help you make your decision about who you wish to make the offer to.
Okay, I appreciate that. So kind of going back to reference checks, I'm just kind of curious. So basically what you described would, you would do hire a private investigator to do a background check or whatever to look for DWIs and that sort of thing. But what about just reference checks?
Sure.
From former supervisors or peers or even subordinates of those candidates?
Excellent question. And the way that is done, the application process that we require for each of the people who wish to be considered requires them to provide three letters of reference, three actual fresh letters of reference done within the last several months, and the names of three previous supervisors or subordinates that they would like to use. And then, as I mentioned, all five of us have a number of contacts over the years. For example, if we knew that somebody had worked in the Central Consolidated School District, we know people in the Central Consolidated District, we will call them and check on that person. So we do additional checking beyond just those 6 references that are provided us. And board has copies of the reference materials that are being provided when the applicant makes those 3 the 3 letters of reference the board would have a chance to look at. We would then conduct we would call and do the work on behalf of the board regarding the other reference names that the people would provide us. There's a substantial, at least 6 individuals for each finalist would have been met with and discussed.
And if I may interject that another good way to take a look, perhaps there hasn't been something that was criminally charged or it's been expunged. You can find an awful lot of information on the internet going in to take a look. And I'm going to use an example. When I was a superintendent interviewing for principals, I found a candidate had applied, looked good on paper, but then I found that he had embezzled $10,000 from a previous district, but it had been expunged because he'd paid restitution. Well, that still wasn't the kind of person that I wanted in the district, even though that would not have shown up on the criminal background check because it was off his record. So we try and work at more than one angle because there's an awful lot of information out there if you take the time to look for it.
Anything else, Mr. Holguin?
Those are the only questions I have. Thank you very much.
Good questions. Thank you for the opportunity to respond. Mr. Gomez, any questions?
No, sir, not at this time. Just a comment. I appreciate the presentation for one, but the nice thing of using a service like as yours, I mean, it has the transparency with our community and staff and members. So it's not just one-sided that the board chose this, but it's a team united and looking for the best for the district. So thank you.
I would also add, when you use advisory committees, it helps more people in your district be comfortable with the selection that you ultimately make because they've they've had an opportunity to interact with your finalists and have a feel and have had a voice over the course of the time. And it helps, for lack of a better term, a little smoother entry if it's an outside candidate that is selected as they move into a new community. There are people that already have a feel and already feel like they know the individual.
President Sepulveda, any other questions?
I don't have a question. I just have a comment that it is very, very important that if whoever we select, it is very important, I repeat myself again, that it comes out to a 5-0 vote when we select somebody, that it's not a split board, because that is not a good situation to come into.
Thank you. Totally agree. And that's even on step one. If there is somebody in the district that you want to consider, it should truly be a 5-0. It should be a board consensus decision.
Yes. Anything else? So we go to item B.
Mr. President and members of the board, I took Mr. Holguin's request that he wanted this tabled. He didn't want any action on the proposed contract with Prather Consultants. He wanted to go back and discuss it with the rest of the board, Mr. President, but that's your call.
Okay, it is an action item. We will have to vote on it or table it. Do I have a motion?
Gomez, so moved.
Motion by Mr. Gomez. Do I have a second?
Point of order, Mr. President, is a motion to table or to act on it. Mr. Gomez?
My motion was to act on it.
Okay.
Okay. Do I have a second? No second? Okay, before we go on, I just want to remind you that the longer that we put this thing on, the longer it's going to be to get going on finding a superintendent. So, still no second?
And if I may, Mr. President, before you would take action on this, are there questions about the process? If you've had a chance to take a look at the 6 steps in the proposal, I know Dr. Prather had gone through some of them, but are there any questions about the different steps that are involved? This gives you a framework and again is a proposal that would lead to a plan on the amount of time and the steps involved in selecting a superintendent with a facilitator. Or for that matter, if the board decided they want to do this themselves, you would have a framework to work from. But again, I agree with you, it's time consuming. I was a little bit concerned when I found out that your executive secretary is retiring along with your superintendent, because generally when a board facilitated search is performed, they become critical in making sure that everything is in line.
Yes.
So your Ms. Rodriguez being looking at retirement also is going to complicate things for the board. But again, there are other facilitators. But I guess my question is questions on the plan. Mr. Holguin, have you had the opportunity to look at the plan?
I don't necessarily have any other questions on your plan, and I do appreciate you coming in to present that to us, but I would like to explore other options with other consultants and
Absolutely.
just see what else there is, just to see what there is to offer out there. And also I'd like to hear input from our other board members as well.
Sure. And Mr. President, members of the board, the other thing to consider too is an interim if Mr. Mendoza is at a point where his departure is going to leave you without a person. So an interim or acting superintendent could continue through the search process as it's being conducted. But the PowerPoint you saw just a few minutes ago will be sent to all 5 board members tomorrow, along with, you'll get a copy of that with the request for the 1 hour of training credit. So you will see the names of those others, professional search firms that are in there. And there are others around that certainly could do this for you. There are a number of folks that can and do these kinds of searches very effectively. We've been doing them, and we have a pretty good handle on it. We've had very high ratings from the boards that we've worked with, and we can give you additional references if you would like those. But we're available if we can help you, and let me leave it at that.
Well, thank you very much, sir. And still no second. Okay, motion dies due to lack of second.
Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you for yours, and thank you, Dr. Favor. And so if we decide to go with you, I will be giving you a call.
Okay, thank you. It was nice to meet you all.
Same here. Have a good evening. Mr. Mendoza.
Okay, Senator Hill, are you on? Yours,
I'm here.
please.
Thank you. I have to be in another meeting at 6, so I'm going to make it really brief. But I just want to thank you, President Sepulveda and Superintendent, members of the school board, Mr. Gomez, Mr. Holguin. Thank you for getting me on the agenda and giving me an opportunity to give a legislative update. It's an honor and privilege to be your state senator, and I just want to be as accessible as possible during this interim as we prepare for the upcoming legislative session. And thank you, Superintendent Mendoza, for your 8 years of service in the Cobre District and 47 years of experience, or your time in the education system. You deserve some time off, I think. And it's been a very challenging year. Yes, it's been a challenging year for all of us dealing with the pandemic. But I appreciate your service and keeping all of the educators and students and families safe. And also a thank you to Frank Gomez for his years of service in the board, serving on the school board as well. And I just want you to know that advocating for Cobre schools will always be a priority for me. It's my home. I went to Cobre, went to Bayard Elementary, Snell, Cobre. Both of my parents graduated from Cobre. In fact, I went to elementary with Yvonne, Frank's wife. So we're longtime friends. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to also work in the Cobre District as a school psychologist. I started working back in 2002 when George Peru was the special ed director. I really appreciated working with him. And I just am so grateful for the leadership of Melissa Minus as our current special ed director. I've worked with her since 2002 and went to school with her at Cobre many years ago. And I just really appreciate her intelligence, her work ethic, and compassion and dedication to the families and children here in the Cobre District. And quickly moving on to the legislative session, it was just really an honor to serve in this historic district. We had capital outlay money that our governor didn't veto, so I'm really grateful for her support and the support of our Lieutenant Governor, Howie Morales. We have a lot of money coming into Grant County, over $11 million, and really proud of the efforts that we made just working together And that money is going to help us recover economically as we move through the pandemic. We're going to be able to create a lot of jobs, expand our outdoor recreational opportunities, and a lot of that money is going directly to improve the life of and the quality of life for our children and working families in our county. And we accomplished that working together with Priscilla Lucero and the governor and our lieutenant governor. Cobre will be getting $200,000 for emergency technology equipment, and Bayard is getting $450,000 for the public safety building upgrade, $75,000 for recreational facility improvement, and $1 million for the water tanks improvements. And as far as legislation goes, I sponsored 16 pieces of legislation during the regular session and co-sponsored an additional 4 bills. I worked closely with Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales during the session, and he was a great mentor. Of those pieces of legislation, I was able to pass 8 bills and 1 memorial, and I carried the LEDA bill, the Local Economic Development Bill, during the special session, and that also passed. And it's going to give New Mexico a real chance to compete for thousands of great jobs, and will help us recover economically from the pandemic as well. And that was a bipartisan bill that I carried with Senator Griggs, and we were just able to get a $1.3 billion deal because of that bill. So really grateful for that. The legislative session, during the session, we passed a $7.4 billion budget. And a lot of that money is just going to be key to investing in public education and early childhood well-being, economic development, and pandemic and behavioral health and infrastructure that we really need right now. I'll just talk about 3 of the bills I was really proud to be able to carry. Senate Bill 193 was the Rural Equity Ombudsman that I carried with Senator Crystal Diamond, and that creates a position for a person who will advocate for rural communities. I also carried the Senate Bill 190, which is the Developmental Disabilities Planning Council bill, and it updates the language for the DD Act, which is really important to me. I have a son who was born with a rare genetic syndrome and has multiple disabilities, and so supporting our community, our families and people with disabilities will always be a priority for me. And another bill I was really proud to be able to sponsor was House Bill 222, which creates a special ed ombudsman to help families have the support when navigating our special education department and system. Senate Memorial 1 was Outdoor Classroom Task Force. It creates an outdoor classroom task force. I just met with the PED secretary last week to discuss the next steps to create this interagency task force to promote outdoor classrooms. So I'm really excited to watch that development, and it'll be really important as we recover from the pandemic as well. I'm on the Senate Finance Committee, and I'm also on the Legislative Finance Committee. So I'm really proud of that. It'll give me a good opportunity to be able to advocate for our rural community. And so I just want to offer my commitment to you all to work closely with the new superintendent and the school board to make sure that Cobre always has a strong voice in Santa Fe. So thank you for the time. Sorry it was so rushed, but I need to jump over to my other meeting. So thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Well, thank you for coming and being with us. And I'm sure you'll be hearing from us off and on.
Sounds great. I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sepulveda, we'll jump back up to the calendars, school calendars.
Yes.
And Ms. Barrela will present the teachers' requests?
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board. So I know you have copies of the calendars. I'm going to ask you to look at the sides, the AA and BB side first, because that's the one that has it color coded, so it'll make it a little bit easier to understand the two calendars. So we did, based on the last time that we brought calendars forth to the board, we did go back, we met with our committee members met with staff multiple times. And so we did create 2 new calendars based on the feedback that we received. So then when we got it down to these final 2 calendars, we did put it out to vote. We made it available and accessible to all staff members. So calendar B or BB, it's the same thing, is a calendar that was preferred by our staff. So we'll take a look at that one first, if that's okay with you all. So both sides are the same. A and AA are exactly the same. It's just the color coding. So that's why I want you to look at the AA side or the BB side so that you can understand the color coding. So with calendar BB, we'll look at that first. So calendar BB would have 10 days of extended learning time. Our staff did vote to participate in extended learning time programs. So the difference between the 2 calendars is really how those 10 days roll out. Calendar AA has the 10 days rolled out throughout the Fridays, every Friday, or various 10 Fridays throughout the school year. Calendar BB would have 4 days up front, which would be August 2nd through 5th, and then 6 Fridays. Calendar A, again, would have the 10 days on Fridays. No days up front, no days at the end of the year. So those are the big days, the 2 calendars. When we roll out the calendar to the parents, it would be the other side that we would be looking at, either side A or side B. We're not going to color code because all the days would be required days for students. The 154 instructional days plus the 10 extended learning time days. Those are all required for students. So it was a request from the calendar committee and staff feedback that was received by the committee not to color code the days, to leave them all in yellow. And that's why we have it showing that way. But we wanted you to see, for clarification purposes, the color coding. The other thing in going back and meeting with our committees, meeting with our staff, and looking at the different options that were put forth by PED in reference to the K5 Plus program. What our staff and our principals preferred looking at, as opposed to adding the additional 20 days for the K5 Plus, which we could stack them with the ELTP, they preferred looking at the new pilot program that the PED put out there, which means that adding an additional 45 minutes to each day, which would equate to the additional 25 days that were required by the state. So that's why you don't see additional K5 Plus days in the calendar. You only see the 10 ELTP days, because again, K5 Plus for pre-K through 5th grade, that would be an extended 45 minutes per day. We did get word today, however, from the PED about our application for the extended 140 program for the K5 Plus. We only had 2 schools who were selected to participate in that pilot program, and that is Hurley and Bayard Elementary. They did let us know that they had multiple applications from different districts throughout the state. They had to limit the request because of the amount of funding that they had. So they used a ranking system. I'm not sure exactly how they ranked them, but that's based on the ranking system is how Bayard and Hurley were selected for the program. Are there any questions in reference to the calendar?
I've got a question, Joyce. This is Toy. On most of them, so how many 5-day weeks are we looking at here for the whole students?
It would be 6. It'd be 6. Yes.
Under calendar A or calendar AA or BB? Which?
So calendar A would have 10 5-day weeks. Calendar B would have 6 5-day weeks, because we would do August 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th as additional part of those 10 days.
Okay.
And that was really the feedback that we got back from the staff. The reason why they selected calendar B, because they wanted to minimize the number of 5-day weeks, minimize the number of Fridays that everybody came to work. And that's why they said they preferred to come a week before school started, so that we could get 4 days in and only have to do 6 5-day weeks.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Joyce, can you, I'm sorry, can you please explain again how the 45 minutes equates to that specific number of days of
Yes. So K5 plus is typically 25 days. They do allow the 4-day week districts to do 20 days. However, in talking with our staff, that wasn't what they wanted to do. They wanted to look at the new pilot program that the state just put out. So what would happen is every day, the school day for pre-K through grade 5 would be lengthened by 45 minutes. And when you multiply those 45 minutes by the 164 instructional days, that's how we get the equivalent of 25 days. Now, for the pilot program, we weren't allowed to say, okay, we're a 4-day week, it's going to be the equivalent of 20 days, or we're a 5-day week, it's going to be the equivalent of 25 days. It was, if you're going to apply for this program, it's the equivalent of 25 days. So again, if you multiply the 45 minutes times the 164 days of instruction, that's how they get the equivalent time.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So I guess my follow-up question then is, do the teachers feel like adding 45 additional minutes per day equates in quality to those 20 or 25 days?
Well, they do, because they feel like they can get more in throughout the day, every day, because they'll have that additional 45 minutes. So the goal is really to look at extending the math and the English language arts at the elementary level to be able to get in more time for those core subjects using those 45 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And so they would, I don't know, I think about attention span and, you know, some of our kids and how challenging that can be sometimes. And I'm just wondering if that's going to be an issue at all. But I'm sure they've thought about that.
Right. And one of the things, you know, Mr. Holguin, that we would look at to be able to help with that is we do have the PE, the music and the art. You know, we would look at being able to provide one of those each day to the students and give them maybe a possibility of a 45 minutes so that they could have that mental break to be able to handle those extra 45 minutes. And it would also be a break for the staff because their day will be longer as well.
Right. Okay, I appreciate that.
And the staff, the teachers and the EAs would be compensated for those additional 45 minutes that they would be working. So now that only 2 schools were approved, we do have to go back and look at that. But again, teachers and EAs would be compensated for those extra 45 minutes they would be working every day.
Thank you, Joyce. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you, Joyce. Mr. Mendoza.
Mr. President, members of the board, The administration recommends the approval of calendar B as presented by Ms. Barrera.
You heard the recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
Gabe, I'll move.
Motion by Mr. Holguin, second.
Gomez, second.
Second by Mr. Gomez. Any other questions? Call for the vote. Mr. Holguin,
Yes.
Mr. Gomez,
Yes.
myself, yes, motion carries. Thank you, Joyce, and everybody for their hard work on this thing.
Under administration, item D, Mr. Sepulveda and members of the board, is just a brief update on school reentry. Ms. Barrera.
Okay, hello again. So for the school reentry, the only thing I really have is we've had no new cases reported to us since the last board meeting. And so we have not had to quarantine any students since our last board meeting. We do have some of our students who are now being vaccinated, and we are reporting those to the state on a weekly basis. We did send out some additional information. I do want to thank our nurses, Danielle, Stevie, and Lucy, for getting that information out to our students in reference to vaccination.
Okay. Thank you. We just need to go back real quick to item 2, public input in reference to our agenda. Do we have anybody, Victor?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay. Continue, Mr. Mendoza.
Okay, item B, Mr. President, members of the board, preventive maintenance plan. Hey, George Peru, please. George?
Yes, sir. That's the plan. I visited with a couple of the board members already and visited Mr. Mendoza. This is a preventative maintenance plan for the school year 2021 and 2022 that we have to do. This plan, when I started working on this back in 15, 16 years ago, when I started doing this, it was 5 pages. And as you all see now, we are at like 40 pages now. No, yep, 40 pages, including the signature page. So it's just more and more things that we're having to document. And it actually works out good because one that this helps is that this is just like the facility master plan. If we do it correctly, it helps us when we go after capital outlay money. So I'm asking that you approve it. That way I can get the signatures and get it up to the PSFA. Is there any questions on what I emailed you and if you guys were able to review it? Anybody have any questions on it?
No? Any questions?
No, sir? Okay.
Okay.
All righty. Thank you, sir. Sure appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, George.
Mr. President, members of the board, the administration recommends that you approve it as presented by Mr. Peru.
You heard the recommendation. Do I hear a motion?
Gomez, so moved.
Motion by Mr. Gomez, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Holguin. Any other questions, comments? Call for the vote. Mr. Holguin.
Yes.
Mr. Gomez.
Yes.
Myself, yes. Motion carries. Item F.
Okay, point of order.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Sepulveda. Thank you, George. Point of order, Mr. Sepulveda and board members. I would like to recommend that we allow Ms. Barrera to present F, G, H, and I because it kind of interrelates the whole presentation. And then we can have one action item to put on it at the end if it approves, if you would approve that, Mr. President.
That's fine with me. I don't know about the other board members.
Yeah, I have no issues.
That's fine with me.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna go through all 4.
Okay, Mr. President, members of the board, we do have 4 applications in front of you. The first one is the Title I plan. So basically, the Title I plan is the same as it was last year with the exception of fewer dollars that we were given by the state. If I look at all 4 plans as a whole, The only real changes from last year's plan is the assessments. We are now using the interim MSSA assessment for grades 3 through 5, and we're using iReady Math at the elementary. The other thing that has changed between all the applications is the enrollment numbers. So those are reflective of our current enrollment. Curriculum materials, we did adopt the Ready Math curriculum at the elementary and the Carnegie Math at the secondary. The academic plan that is outlined in these plans is based on our structured literacy plan that was submitted to the state. So I guess if we take one at a time, are there any questions on Title I application? Okay. Title II.
The questions?
Any questions on Title III? Okay, and then the final application is the fine arts application. So are there any questions on any of the 4 applications?
I guess this is Gabe. I guess my question is, were these vetted through the finance committee at all?
No, sir, they have not been. No, sir, they have not been.
Okay, and is that something that we want to do before we approve these?
I don't feel that they need to, because these are all monies that the state gives us, and there ain't much we can do about what the amount of money that they give us in reference to the number of students that we have. Any other questions?
Wait, hold on, Mr.
Mr. President, I was just able to join now.
Carrie has a comment on that, Gabe?
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. President and members of the board. So these are the applications, and the applications are being submitted as you have been indicated in the packet. The application contains the narratives and so forth, positions that, if any, that are allowed under the grants. The budget part of it is a separate process. The application has to be approved before a bar or a budget can be entered into the system. So it's a preference for the board, but if the application needs to go to PED, then they will ask for the budget after that.
Thank you, Terry.
Mr. President, this is Gilbert Guadiana. I was finally able to get back on. I had a question. Is this the ESEA application?
All 4 applications that we're looking at once, Mr. Guadiana, we're looking at all of them, the Title I, the Title II, the Title III, and the Fine Arts.
Okay, then the one that's marked ESA.
Title I.
Title I. Okay, I have some questions regarding the parent involvement. It allows, I guess, line item for that, and we're not putting anything there for costs. But then we have a part where the parents are participating, or there's supposed to be a community review team, and that is supposed to do.
That's usually typically done at the beginning of the year. All the schools have their own Title I meetings when they have the open house at the beginning of the year. And then all the schools also have their parent advisory committees where they are to review this information with their parent committees.
see if I can, and I apologize, I'm just barely stepping back in, so I had notes on this. You don't have the pages numbered, but on module 5, sorry. It says in the middle of the first paragraph, the process that the district uses to start the community meetings begins at the beginning of the school year to solicit stakeholder program input and fund usage. When did that happen?
Well, this year, the principals did them remotely, but those meetings are always held at the beginning of the year, usually the first or second week of school in the evenings.
And it says also that there's
and there is a PowerPoint presentation regarding Title I requirements that the principals do go through at the beginning of the year meetings.
And what is a PLC?
Professional learning communities. That's where teachers meet together to look at data and make curriculum decisions.
And does it involve parents?
No, the advisory council committees involve parents.
Okay, so it says that the principals at each building shall meet with the school advisory committees on a monthly basis to solicit feedback and discuss how to spend the funds.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And
we did get meeting dates from the principals because we are required to input those in here. We didn't have as many as we typically have with the whole COVID situation, but those do happen on a regular basis.
And what data are they provided with? And who's on the advisory committees? Can I get lists of who's there on those?
I would not have those, Mr. Guadiana. Each of the individual principals would have their list of their committees.
Joyce, can I say something?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, these are just applications. We still don't know if this money is going to come or how much of this money is going to come. So this is just approving the application, right?
Yes, sir.
But in the application, there's a list of detail that is supposed to come up with at least some analysis, some assessment of what the application is supposed to address. And I was kind of curious as to whether the entities that were supposed to put that together actually did that. And I'm disappointed that we don't have anything that compiles the data from these advisory committees to show us that this is what was built into the plan.
Well, I think that that's something that needs to be taken up with the principals.
They're not the ones that present this.
But they're the ones that put it together.
Mr. Guadiana, the principals are the ones that conduct the parent advisory council meetings. If they have any feedback, they would share that with us for the application.
So you're saying there was no feedback then?
No, sir.
Okay. The other continuing complaint is this is a budget item that should have gone to the finance committee and didn't. Not surprisingly.
Miss Holguin just explained that, Mr. Guadiana.
And what was the explanation?
Go ahead, Terry, for the second time.
Yes, so what I stated was that the application specifies the purpose of the grant and the request for the funding, the budget will follow in OVMS, and generally the application is requires approval before the budget is required to be submitted. So the budget will go to the finance.
The proposal includes funding of 50% of half an FTE for the associate superintendent and half an FTE for the secretary administrative. I assume the first one would be Dr. Carrillo,
Yes.
and the second one would be whom?
Whoever's hired to be the administrative assistant for federal programs, if there's one.
So we don't have this position at this time,
No.
and we're asking for a 50% FTE.
Yes, half time.
So is that the way that we're intending to go out with it then? Or is there going to be some other position that picks this up as well?
It'll be split funded so that if whoever's hired is hired full time, and it'll be hired between two grants to do federal programs.
Okay, and so the title administrative secretary then would incorporate another position?
Yes. It's been budgeted like that before, the prior year application.
Yeah, I'm not quite happy with our before history. So how many so when is this the actual budget due? Only if it gets passed?
Yes.
Okay. And when is the time frame for having it passed?
We would need to get them passed now because they actually, two of them were due on Friday, and one of them is due this Friday. The fine arts is due this Friday. We were anticipating the board meeting last week. We were going to bring them then because they were due on Friday. But because we rescheduled our board meeting, they were due on Friday.
And so that wasn't intended to go either to the budget committee.
Well, as Terry stated, we have to approve the application and then it goes to the budget committee.
But there's allocations made for positions.
But with the application, you're still not sure if you're going to get that money or not. How can you hire somebody when you don't know you're going to have the money?
How can you make a plan? And then
Well, the plan is looking forward and submitting the application for the money. And then if that money comes, then you hire a person.
okay, so the way it was supposed to work for the board is the board should say whether they want to accept the grant or not based on the availability of funding for the positions allocated in that. So if we submit this as approved and it comes back and we find that the positions aren't really sufficiently funded and we'll have to fund them from something else, like our regular funds, the board should have the option of not accepting the grant. And if that's the case, then I'm okay with it. But if it is that this is an approval of it and that come what may, it's going to go forward, then...
This is an application to try to get the money.
Mhm.
And without the application, we don't know yet if we're going to get the money or not. So we can't hire nobody until after the application is approved. And then when it's approved, then it comes back to budget.
Mr. President, if I could say that based on the allocated amount, the application in reference, which is a Title I application, is much more than just two staffing positions.
Yes, it is. And that's where that's where the board should be very much involved in, and we're not.
So as I stated before I started presenting the applications, these applications do mirror the applications that have been submitted for the last 2 years.
And for the last 30 years, they haven't been reviewed.
I've not been here for the last 30, so I can't answer that, Mr. Padilla.
Neither have I, but I can pretty make the supposition based on what goes on now.
They have been reviewed. When the money comes back in, then they're reviewed. At this point, it's an application. When you go to get the job, when you go apply for a job, you put in an application. You're not assuming that you already have the job. So that's the point. So let's move on. Do I hear a motion to approve these?
Gomez, so moved.
Motion by Mr. Gomez, second.
This Gabe, I'll second.
Second by Mr. Holguin. Call for the vote. I think we've talked about it enough. Mr. Holguin.
Yes.
Mr. Gomez.
Yes.
Mr. Williana.
No, because it hasn't gone to the budget.
Motion carries. Move on to the Superintendent Report, Mr. Mendoza.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, members of the board, first item that I wanted to talk about is an overview of the district budget as we see it currently. But then, unfortunately, Saturday morning, I received a new 910 B5 report, and it was showing us $110,000 less appropriated. So that means Terry and the Finance Committee will have to look at that when we meet this week. So really, we don't have an update right now because that hit us again. For it was another cut. All right, so we weren't anticipating that. So that report will not take place tonight. I do want the board to know that I've included elementary calendars for your review. So you choose to, if you want to attend any of the events that are going on the elementary, you should have those in your packet. I'm advising the board that the next board meeting will be this coming Monday, the 24th. It looks like we're having back-to-back. We're trying to catch up with the second May board meeting, so this coming Monday. And also a reminder, board members, that graduation is this Friday. And I'd like to ask that all board members report around 5:30, 5:40, so that we can be there to greet our graduates on time. So a 5:30, no later than 5:40 report. And Mr. President, members of the board, that concludes my superintendent's report for tonight. So if we go on to student rep.
Before you go on, Mr. Mendoza, I just have a comment on the reporting of the board members to the graduation. I'm sorry to say that I will not be able to be there because I'm going to have to be at the doctor's office Friday because they're going to start injections in my eyes again. So I've got the first appointment Friday. So I will not be able to be at graduation.
Sandra, do you have any comments about the graduation?
I'm just asking if you guys can go through the gate on Jones Street. We'll have a custodian there to let you guys in, and you will be parking in front of daycare. And Mr. Sepulveda will be missing you.
Thank you.
We hope everything goes well at your appointment.
I hope so too.
Okay. Okay, Toya, are you online? Toya Ortiz?
I don't think she's online, sir.
Okay. So, Mr. Sepulveda,
that moves us to public input. And do we have anything, Victor?
No, sir, not at the moment. I'm not sure if you guys have been getting any emails, but maybe check your inbox. but we haven't received anything.
Okay. I'd like to comment on an email that we did receive, all the board received, and it related to the expenses on the bond money. And I had, all the board members got it, the superintendent got it, and I had asked for it to be put on the agenda for this week for discussion. As a possible motion, there was several items brought up, including change orders that need to have some serious answers to them. And I would like for that either to be part of the agenda for the next meeting, or that, or that we have, if there's not a substantive response to it, that we consider a forensic audit to make sure that we weren't overpaying for something or paying twice for something, which seemed to be the conditions that were pointed out. Okay. Okay, as in that's going to be part of the agenda, or?
Mr. Sepulveda,
Yes, sir.
Sepulveda, the recommendation here from the superintendent, that was directed to me, and that's, I'm not going to mention names, but I'm working on a response, and it's all there. I know Mr. Guardiana's good at coming up with accusations here and there, but you need to let us here respond to the person that's asking for that information. And we don't have to jump to a forensic audit. I mean, that's procurement was done throughout the project. So I have no problem answering whatever this gentleman is asking for. But with things that are going on right now, graduation, I'm also going to probably send him another email that in lieu of what's been happening here with the school ending and stuff, I'm probably not going to be able to get him all the information until probably Monday or Tuesday of next week. So with that, I'll leave it at that. No, we're not recommending that this be an item at this time.
Well, I'm asking that it be an item on the agenda to consider. And the request came in over a week ago, and there was, I guess, pointing him in a direction of another staff member who had no way to answer those questions. And so I do have a trait of asking some serious questions for accountability. And we've never really had a good explanation of any change orders or any of the transactions taken with the bond issue. So I too, just because it was submitted by somebody else, I agree with them. And I think this should be answered not at your leisure, but at one that if we haven't answered that question before, the question raises, why haven't we been informed of these transactions? And it is within the audit committees, the finance committees to request a review of that. And in that scenario, I would also want to do that. And the history that you have, Mr. Mendoza, in responding to things, I think could use some serious improvement, including the responses that I asked related to going forward with the recall. Those are some pretty sorry responses. And nevertheless, it's going to go forward. But I think that's indicative that rather than looking at it from the pointed ways that I bring things up as to what is the response when there's allegations of misdoing. And I will continue to do that. And I would hope that your responses would be accurate, and they would be complete, and they would be timely.
Okay, well, thank you for your comments. Items for next agenda.
I have one more comment on this agenda. And I'm sorry I missed it. I don't know if any of it was articulated, but in having already a vendor, what happened with that? Did we approve the vendor for the search?
You can read the minutes if you want to.
Okay, then let me bring up the objection. The objection is that,
We didn't approve the vendor.
You didn't?
No.
Cool.
Okay, never mind. Thank you. Thank you, Troy, for your cooperation.
You're welcome. Mr. Mendoza, items for next agenda.
I have none at this time, but it'll be later in the week that we'll get them all together. But at this point, I have none.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
So move. Gomez, so move.
Motion by Mr. Gomez. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
See you.